In a bustling supermarket in the heart of the city, the scent of fresh produce, mixed with the hum of busy workers and the chatter of customers, it was a place where different lives intersected. People from all walks of life came together to make a living. Among them, two women stood out for very different reasons. Lena, a janitor in her late 30s, moved through the aisles with quiet grace. Her face, though lined with the wear of hard work, carried a softness that mirrored her heart. Every day she woke up early to clean the floors, wipe down the counters, and ensure the store was spotless for its customers. It wasn't glamorous, but Lena didn't mind. She did it for her family, especially her sick mother who required constant care and her young son who dreamed of a better life. Each shift was a sacrifice, but it was one Lena accepted without complaint. She worked extra hours whenever possible, always putting others before herself. In stark contrast was Samantha, a young cashier in her mid-20s, who stood behind the register, looking down at everyone around her. She dressed in expensive clothes, her latest designer bag swinging by her side, and she had a cocky air about her that made it clear she thought she was better than most. Her sharp eyes always scanned the store, looking at others with a critical eye. Lena, in particular, caught her attention. She would often make snide comments about Lena's low-paying job, laughing with her coworkers about how broke Lena must be. Samantha didn't care about the struggles of others. She was more interested in her own image and the money she made, money she believed she deserved. Samantha's life seemed like the complete opposite of Lena's. Every morning she walked into the store with the kind of confidence only money and privilege could buy. Her designer handbags, new and always on trend, hung on her arm as she strutted through the aisles, her heels clicking with every step. Her phone, the latest model, was always glued to her hand as she scrolled through social media, showing off pictures from her lavish vacations and nights out at expensive clubs. "Just got back from Paris," she would say, as if the entire world should know how fortunate she was. Every time she talked, it was about the next party or the latest luxury item she'd bought. She had no shortage of things to flaunt, and she did so with no shame. Lena, on the other hand, often slipped into the shadows of the store, doing her work quietly and without fanfare. Her worn-out shoes squeaked on the floors, each step a reminder of the countless hours she'd put in, cleaning the same aisles over and over again. She hadn't bought new shoes in months, choosing instead to stretch what little money she had to cover her son's school supplies or her mother's medical bills. Sometimes she skipped meals just to make sure there was enough money left over for rent. Yet, despite the constant struggle, Lena remained a warm and kind soul, greeting every customer with a soft smile, never complaining about her situation. She believed that kindness was worth more than anything money could buy. One afternoon, Samantha, as usual, was busy chatting with her coworkers by the front registers, her laughter ringing out as she boasted about her recent shopping spree. She took a sip from her iced coffee, the condensation from the cup dripping onto the counter, leaving small puddles. Without a care, she purposely knocked the cup over, spilling the drink onto the floor, making a mess. "Oh no," she exclaimed, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I guess someone will have to clean that up." Her eyes met Lena's as she stood in the aisle nearby, already anticipating the scene she was about to create. Lena's heart sank, knowing exactly what was coming. She had seen it before, the way Samantha enjoyed putting her down, as if her lowly job made Lena less of a person. But Lena, always trying to avoid conflict, said nothing as she grabbed the nearest mop and bucket and walked over to clean up the mess. Samantha stood with her arms crossed, a smug look on her face as she watched Lena do the work, as if it was expected of her. A few feet away, the store manager, Mr. Harris, observed the interaction. He was aware of the tension between the two, but he didn't intervene. Maybe it was because Samantha was more vocal and seemed to have the upper hand, or maybe it was because he was used to seeing Lena silently take the abuse. Whatever the reason, Mr. Harris didn't say a word, letting Lena take the burden of cleaning up a mess that wasn't even hers to begin with. Lena kept her head down, mopping the floor in silence, trying not to let the humiliation show. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the mop, but from the sting of the cruelty she endured. She didn't know why Samantha enjoyed mocking her so much, but she'd learned not to fight back. Instead, she let the harsh words and the cruel glances roll off her back, keeping her eyes on the task at hand. But even as she cleaned, a small part of her was breaking, hurt by the way she was treated. Still, she said nothing. She couldn't afford to cause a scene. The day Samantha's world began to crumble was the day she was called into Mr. Harris's office. It wasn't a surprise to anyone, but it still felt like a punch to the gut for her. The store had been struggling for months, sales were down, the economy had hit hard, and customers had been complaining about the poor service. And while other employees tried to keep their heads down and their attitudes in check, Samantha's arrogance had made her a target. Her dismissive attitude toward customers, the snarky remarks, and the way she treated her coworkers had not gone unnoticed. Mr. Harris was direct. "Samantha, we've received several complaints about your behavior. Customers have expressed frustration with how you treat them, and frankly, I can't keep you here if you're damaging the store's reputation. I'm sorry, but you're being let go." Samantha stared at him, shocked. She opened her mouth to argue, but he held up a hand, cutting her off. "This is final, Samantha. You're free to leave." For the first time in a long while, Samantha was speechless. She was always the one in control, always the one calling the shots. But now, the power had shifted. She grabbed her things in a daze, muttering something under her breath about how she'd find another job immediately. At first, she didn't think much of it. Samantha was convinced that a girl like her could find another job easily. She was young, attractive, and had the right connections. She didn't need to worry. She'd always been able to get what she wanted, so why would this be any different? But weeks passed, and reality hit hard. She sent out dozens of resumes, but no one called her back. She had never built the kind of professional relationships that mattered, and her attitude had left a trail of bad references in her wake. The interviews she did get were awkward, and it became increasingly clear that her overconfidence had alienated her from those who could have helped her. Samantha's savings, which she had once thought would last forever, began to dwindle. Her bank account emptied as she tried to hold on to her expensive lifestyle, but it was impossible. Her rent was due, the bills piled up, and she could no longer afford the luxuries she had once taken for granted. She reluctantly sold her designer handbags, the ones that had once made her feel invincible. She sold her expensive phone, traded in the latest model for an old, outdated version. Eventually, the last of her savings vanished. The once glamorous life she had lived was gone, and she had to move into a much smaller, cheaper apartment in a rundown part of town. She didn't have a choice. Desperation settled in as she realized just how far she'd fallen. She was no longer the girl who walked into the store with designer clothes and a cocky attitude. Now, she was a woman who couldn't even pay her rent on time. One evening, after weeks of failed job applications, Samantha sat in front of her computer, exhausted. She was ready to give up, but then a listing caught her eye. It was for a janitor position at a local supermarket, one not far from where she had worked. Her heart sank. It felt like a step backward, but what else could she do? She had no other skills, no other option. She applied immediately, hoping that maybe, just maybe, she would get the job. Days later, the phone rang, and to her surprise, she was called in for an interview. The supermarket's manager seemed uninterested in her past work experience. After all, she didn't have much to boast about anymore. But they needed someone immediately, and Samantha, desperate for any income, took the job. She showed up on her first day, her heart heavy with the weight of her own pride. She had once looked down on people like Lena, the janitors, the cleaners, the ones who worked quietly behind the scenes. But now, here she was, just like them. The irony wasn't lost on her. The first few days of Samantha's new job were a shock to her system. She wasn't used to manual labor. She had always relied on her looks, her charm, and her designer bags to get by. Now, she found herself on her hands and knees, scrubbing floors in the aisles of the supermarket she had once walked through with such pride. The dirty, sticky floors seemed to mock her every movement, just as she had once mocked the janitors she passed without a second thought. She struggled to keep up with the endless list of tasks. Scrubbing toilets, mopping floors, wiping down counters, it was grueling work, and the exhaustion quickly set in. Her body ached in ways it never had before, and by the time she finished one task, another would be waiting. Her once perfect nails were now chipped and worn, her hands rough from the constant scrubbing. The beautiful, flawless skin she'd taken so much pride in now bore the marks of hard work and long hours. But the most difficult part of all was the way her coworkers treated her. They didn't show her the same respect she had once shown herself. The other janitors didn't hold back their comments, teasing her about her fall from grace. Guess you finally got what you deserved, one of them remarked as she mopped a spill in the aisle. Always thought you were too good for this kind of work, huh? Samantha's cheeks burned, and though she tried to brush it off, the sting of their words cut deep. She had once thought she was above this kind of work, but now she was no better than the people she had looked down on. Her pride was crumbling with each passing day, and she could feel the weight of her own arrogance suffocating her. The customers weren't any better, they'd ignore her entirely, treating her like she was invisible, or worse, they would look at her with disdain. Once a woman dropped a candy wrapper on the floor right in front of her and sneered, "You're supposed to clean that up, right?" Samantha bit her tongue, resisting the urge to lash out. It felt so humiliating. This was the life she had mocked for so long, and now, she was stuck in it. Meanwhile, Lena's life was starting to change in ways Samantha never imagined. After years of dedication and hard work, Lena's efforts were finally being recognized. The supermarket had recently brought in new management, and they were looking for employees who were reliable and willing to go the extra mile. Lena's name had come up in several discussions, and after a quick review of her performance, they decided to promote her. Lena, always humble, was shocked when her manager told her she'd be moving to the cashier position. "You've earned this, Lena," he said. "You're always here, always helping, and we appreciate your dedication." For the first time in a long time, Lena felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't much, she wasn't going to become rich or famous from this promotion, but it was a step forward. Her son had always believed in her, and now, for the first time in years, Lena felt like she was finally doing something for herself. The money wouldn't be much more, but she would be able to support her family with more dignity, no longer hidden in the shadows of the store. But nothing prepared her for what happened next. One afternoon, as Lena was behind the register ringing up customers, she saw a familiar face. It was Samantha. Samantha, in a worn-out uniform, pushing a cleaning cart down the aisle, her shoulders slumped in exhaustion. Lena froze for a moment, unsure if she was imagining things. But no, it was really her. Samantha looked up and saw Lena, and for a brief second, their eyes locked. Lena saw the shame in Samantha's face, the humiliation that came with the reality of her situation. But instead of mocking her, Lena felt a wave of sympathy wash over her. She could see it clearly now. The arrogance had melted away, replaced by the weight of her fall from grace. But Samantha didn't approach her, she didn't even smile, she simply turned her head and hurried past, pretending she hadn't seen Lena. The look of shame was too much for her to handle, and Lena couldn't help but feel a small pang of sorrow for her. There was no joy in seeing someone else suffer, no sense of satisfaction in witnessing someone get what they deserved. Lena understood the cost of pride, the pain of seeing your world crumble when you had once thought you were untouchable. For a moment, Lena considered calling out to Samantha, maybe offering a kind word, but she stopped herself. Samantha wasn't ready to hear it. She had to face her own demons first. Instead, Lena went back to her work, letting the silence between them linger in the air. One busy afternoon, as Samantha was cleaning the floor near the checkout lanes, a customer walked by with a drink in hand. The drink was knocked over, spilling onto the tiles in a messy puddle. Samantha froze, and before she could even react, one of the cashiers, someone she barely knew, coldly looked at her and said, "You're supposed to clean that up." The words hit her like a punch in the stomach. It was exactly the kind of thing she had once said to Lena. Her cheeks burned as she bent down to grab the mop, feeling the sting of humiliation all over again. But then, something unexpected happened. As she struggled to clean up the mess, Lena appeared at her side, holding a spare cloth in her hand. Without a word, Lena silently helped her wipe up the spill, her movements steady and kind, just as she had always been. Samantha's hands shook as she worked, the weight of what she had done pressing down on her chest. She couldn't hold back her emotions any longer. "I'm sorry, Lena," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I've been so awful to you, I never realized how wrong I was. I mocked you, I treated you like you were less than me, and I didn't see how hard you were working. How hard it is to just survive." Lena paused, her eyes softening. She looked at Samantha with a quiet understanding. "It's okay," Lena said, her voice gentle. "But remember, how we treat others says more about us than it does about them. Be kind, work hard, but never look down on someone else. Samantha nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. She had learned a hard lesson, one that would change her forever. From that moment on, she promised herself she would work harder, be kinder, and never take anything for granted again. She had learned the true value of humility and respect, something she would carry with her for the rest of her life. Thank you so much for watching this emotional journey of humility, hard work, and personal growth. Sometimes, life teaches us the most valuable lessons in the most unexpected ways. Just like Samantha, we all go through moments that challenge us to change, to be kinder, and to appreciate the struggles of others. If you enjoyed this story and felt moved by it, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss another touching story like this one. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up and share it with your friends to spread the message of kindness and understanding. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know how this story made you feel. Thank you for being part of this journey with us. Stay humble, stay kind, and remember every small act of goodness matters.